Okay, ladies and gentlemen, if I could please ask you to take your seats. We're now going to begin the afternoon session. It's a special honor yet. Our audience tends to be growing in quality and quantity as the day is going on, so I'm very pleased now that President Uteem has joined us, coming all the way from Mauritius. And I would like you to say a few words of introduction. President Caasam Uteem is actually the president who's served the longest in the entire history of Mauritius, and has really demonstrated during his career as president, as well as after his career, a tremendous dedication also to the issue of soft power in terms of also bringing individuals together from different cultures, from different backgrounds, both within Mauritius, as well as his involvement in the international scene afterwards, whether it's through Club of Madrid or the many other organizations, which we'll learn about also during his presentation. So the topic for his presentation today is democratic participation and cultural inclusion in multi-ethnic and multilingual societies. So it's a topic that I think is actually relevant for everyone in this room, whether it's on the African continent, whether it's in Berlin, whether it's in Germany, or the international sphere. So in that sense, I think it's a special honor that we really have someone of the tremendous experience of President Uteem to speak on this topic. And I think it's a topic that really we can all relate to and is actually of vital importance as Germany struggles also to find what is its own identity within the European context. As we all address this issue, cultural diplomacy, how do we first define our own cultures? What is it that matters at the end? What are the values really that hold us together? What are the values that should hold us together? So in that sense, it's really a special honor to have you with us today, and I think we're all very eager to hear your presentation. So if we could all please have a very warm welcome for President Uteem. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this presentation, which I don't think I deserve. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, my colleague, ladies, gentlemen, and dear friends. The worst thing that can happen to a speaker is for him to lose his voice. And I was in the process of losing my voice when I reached Berlin. Fortunately, I have been seen by a professor, a very qualified and competent professor, German, by the way, and he's put my throat back to almost normal. I'm particularly grateful to the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy and its director and founder, Mark Donfred, for associating me with this international symposium on cultural diplomacy. It has given me the privilege of being present in the historic city of Berlin at a time when you are commemorating or about to commemorate the no less historic event that 20 years ago, this year, witnessed the fall of the Berlin Wall. That was to precede the disintegration of the Soviet Empire, the peaceful integration of Germany, the end of the Cold War, and the emergence of a new world, all at the same time. I come from a tiny, faraway country, lost in the Indian Ocean, and your invitation for me to address an august gathering like the one gathered here today is indeed a great honor for my country. Thank you, Mark. I wish to avail myself of this opportunity to express my grateful thanks to the city of Berlin and its mayor, Mr. Klaus Wowereit, or Wowereit, for the warm welcome extended to me for this unfortunately too brief visit. I wish also to underscore the excellent and cordial relations that exist between our two countries, Federal Republic of Germany and the Republic of Mauritius, especially since the opening of our diplomatic mission in Berlin some 7 years back, if I'm not mistaken. In the context of the broad theme of the role of soft power in contemporary international relations, the topic, as you've heard, assigned to me is democratic participation and cultural inclusion in multi-ethnic and multilingual societies. I shall be dealing with the subject with special reference to my country, which is a multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-religious, and multilingual society. My expose will start with a brief introduction of my country, the Republic of Mauritius, which many of you might not yet have discovered in tourism promotion and holiday brochure. I shall afterwards deal with what is commonly termed multiculturalism or cultural pluralism in the context of societies where people of diverse origins have come to cohabit more or less successfully, before I examine some of the steps that have been taken to create a participative and inclusive society in Mauritius. I shall confine my intervention to 5 headings, besides the introduction and the conclusion. And these are: 1, cultural pluralism, the expression of a political will; 2, globalization and homogeneity; 3, unity in diversity; 4, secularism, not godlessness; and 5, 5th, interfaith dialogue. This is not going to be a thesis, a presentation of a thesis, mind you. I'll speak very quickly on each of the topics that I've just mentioned. And I expect that I will hear more from you than you will have heard from me. Let me start by introducing my country. The Republic of Mauritius consists of one main island, Mauritius, and a group of smaller islands and islets that make up a total land area of 2,040 square kilometers only, 2040 square kilometers. But an exclusive economic zone, an EEZ, that is a marine area of approximately 1.9 million square kilometers. We are a country with more sea than land. Mauritius is a tropical island situated, as I said earlier, lost in the Indian Ocean, off the east coast of Africa and some 800 kilometers from the southeast coast of Madagascar, where the situation is not so good these days, and which has retained, unfortunately, one of my peers, President Chisano, who was to be with us, but as he has been appointed the mediator in the conflict that has emerged in Madagascar, he is not able to be with us today. The population of Mauritius, around 1.3 million, originates from the 4 corners of the world, from Madagascar and different countries of Africa, in particular Mozambique, from India, in particular the states of Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Tamil Nadu, and Andhra Pradesh, from Europe, in particular France and the United Kingdom, fortunately not Germany. I said fortunately because Germany was not a colonizing power in those days, at least in our part of the world. And from China, in particular from the province of Guangdong. There was no indigenous population in Mauritius when it was first discovered by the Arabs and later visited by the Portuguese sailors. Present-day Mauritians are therefore all descendants of immigrants. By the look of me, you wouldn't say that I'm an African, would you? And yet, I'm 100% African. Mauritius belongs to the African Union. Geographically, historically, Mauritius is part of Africa. The first population settlement by the Dutch dates back to slightly over 400 years. The Dutch brought in slaves from Africa and Madagascar. And in the process, they ate all the dodos. Dodo is a bird, an extinct bird. And in the English language, when you say as dead as a dodo, it means that it's dead forever. So I'm told that the flesh of the dodo was so tasty that the Dutch ate them all. But the birds, they were birds, and they had the disadvantage of being so big that they couldn't use their wings. This is not this is not a story. It is history. They couldn't fly, so the Dutch ate them all. When they left, the French took possession of Mauritius in 1722. And again, slaves from Africa were imported to build the cities and the various infrastructures like roads and buildings, and also to work in the sugarcane fields. The British took over from the French in 1810, and on the abolition of slavery, around 1834, they had recourse to Indian indentured laborers to work on the sugar plantations. Today, the population of Mauritius, independent since the 12th March 1968, is one of the most mixed populations of the world and a very cosmopolitan society. Since independence in 1968, Mauritius has experienced significant transformation. From an economy that was almost entirely dependent on sugarcane plantation, it has, through an export-led strategy, developed a broad-based industrial and service-oriented economy. The rapid growth of tourism and financial services sectors during the past decades has helped to consolidate the country's economy. Furthermore, high priority is now being given to the development of the information and communication technology sector to transform the country into cyber island. Much of the sustained progress of Mauritius has been built around basic education, improved health, family planning, skilled entrepreneur, and stable democratic government and peace. The recent, or should we say the current, economic downturn has not spared our country, and we are experiencing a substantial reduction in the number of tourist arrivals at a time when the price of our sugar is falling and our textile export is becoming less competitive in the world market. Let me come now to the first heading. This was only the introduction. The first heading, the cultural pluralism, the expression of a political will. Now, having, so to say, set the stage to deal with the subject matter of my expose, it would be appropriate to underline that the coexistence in the same country of a number of ethnic groups is today the rule rather than the exception it used to be a few decades ago, particularly in this part of the world. Such coexistence, given various names, has been described as cultural diversity, cultural pluralism, polyethnicity, multiculturalism. But for the purpose of this presentation and to avoid confusion, I shall throughout use the expression cultural pluralism. But cultural pluralism is more than the mere coexistence of ethnic, religious, or linguistic groups. Nor is it a simple juxtaposition of cultures within a given society. It is the expression of a political will which aims at making it possible for diverse cultural groups to live together through a policy of deliberate planning and action. In a study being carried out by the Club of Madrid, entitled The Shared Societies, Building a World Safe for Difference, and which is yet to be completed, the following 4 key elements have been found essential to promote cultural pluralism and create socially cohesive or shared societies. 1, democratic participation. 2, respect for diversity and the dignity of the individual. 3, equality of opportunity. And 4, protection from discrimination. Cultural pluralism, notes former Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Fraser. Cultural pluralism is about diversity, not division. It is about interaction, not isolation. It is about cultural and ethnic difference set within a framework of shared fundamental values which enables them to coexist on a complementary rather than a competitive basis. Thus, the expression cultural pluralism implies a dynamic equilibrium between the shared fundamental, or what I call overarching values of the country on the one hand, and ethnic core values on the other. The various ethnic groups in society exhibit their own set of values, many of which percolate into the overarching framework. Such shared values come to be regarded not as the private domain of a particular group, but as the common possession, as the heritage of all the citizens. The second heading is Globalization is Not Homogeneity. There was probably the wish in some quarters and the fear in others that heterogeneous societies will yield to the forces unleashed by globalization, and all societies sooner or later will be transformed into homogeneous ones. Those who feared such an eventuality had lived through the beauty and richness of diversity. But what is it that we notice? What we notice is that in spite of globalization, heterogeneity, not homogeneity, is the order of the day. And it would be unwise and unrealistic to assume that globalization will ever achieve homogeneity. Homogeneity, writes Alvin Toffler, famous American futurologist, homogeneity is not a logical consequence of globalization. The struggle for national unity, national cultures, and the claims of minority groups all point towards a fragmented rather than a homogeneous market. End of quote. This view is shared by many people, and also by George Leo, Singapore, former Minister of Information and the Arts, who stated some time back that no amount of globalization is going to make humanity one homogeneous whole. Communities the world over are integrated into a national mosaic, and this mosaic is really all of one piece. Therefore, in the making of a multicultural society, it is imperative that good governance should take care of some basic principles. First of all, the majority group must never take the minority for granted. The second principle is to allow every community group to preserve its own cultural heritage and to develop its own character within the national framework, thereby making room for diversity. Another essential requisite towards this end is a firm, fair, and honest government with a pragmatic and non-ideological approach towards solving problems. If democracy becomes the tyranny of the majority, Minister Leo went on to say, society would come asunder. We have to facilitate the participation of all groups, however small, so that all feel included and part of a larger polity. In Mauritius, each component of the cosmopolitan Mauritian society has been enriching itself by progressively assimilating elements from other cultures. That is how today the country has inherited a cultural mosaic, which, though constituted from fragments of diverse origins, is held together with a cement of understanding, mutual respect, tolerance, and the common will to promote cultural pluralism. A sympathetic visitor to Mauritius has beautifully summed up this phenomenon in the following words, and I quote, "From homelands in Asia, Africa, and Europe, each of the ethnic groups that makes up a part of the population has brought the elements of its own particular way of life. But once in Mauritius, none of these traditions could remain unaffected by the others. The result has been the formation of a cluster of new traditions, each sharing traits uniquely Mauritian, but each still different and recognizably a branch of its parent culture. So it is that a church, a mosque, and a Hindu temple must stand in geographical proximity while faithfully reflecting in architecture the ideals of wide differing civilizations. But at the same time, each of the buildings has features responding to the particular requirements of the Mauritian climate and social milieu. The individual cultural strands are distinct and yet part of a single harmonious and satisfying pattern constituting a complex social fabric. In today's atmosphere, in which cultural pluralism is encouraged as an enrichment of life, such complexity is a matter of national pride. If this description or appreciation tempts you to visit Mauritius, please feel free. I'm not here to promote tourism for Mauritius, but if incidentally my presence can help in that, I'm sure none of you, not even Mr. Donfred, will object. The third heading is unity in diversity. If such flattering remarks that I have just quoted have been addressed towards Mauritius, it is largely thanks to the fact that unity in diversity, which to me is another expression for cultural pluralism, has been the official policy of nation building since independence. Cultural pluralism implies the freedom of choice. It can therefore exist and flourish only within a democratic form of government. And Mauritius has a long tradition of democracy with a free press and political pluralism. Freedom of association, freedom of expression, and freedom of conscience are all enshrined in the Constitution of Mauritius. The rule of law and the separation of powers constitute the bedrock of our society. For the purposes of elections and representation in Parliament, the population is divided into and registered as 4 different communities: general population, Chinese, Hindu, and Muslim communities. Our electoral system, the first past the post, based on the British Westminster pattern, provides also for the election of what is known as best losers. Yes, among losers also, you can have good losers and best losers. Best losers, a mechanism which ensures adequate representation in Parliament of all 4 communities. This inclusive system, which also has its disadvantages and is being challenged now by some of the younger generation of politicians, allows underrepresented communities in Parliament after an election to have members of Parliament of those communities appointed from the candidates who did not secure enough votes to be elected. This system has encouraged change of government by the ballot instead of by the bullet. But it has also encouraged, some say, communalism. And after 40 years of independence, the time is ripe to review the best loser system. But this is totally a different debate. Thus, the well-entrenched democratic principles have created opportunities for individuals from all walks of life, as well as political parties, small and big, to participate in general elections and be elected to or represented in Parliament. Successive governments since independence have brought about a number of changes and drawn out economic and social strategies that have contributed to wealth creation and distribution. Although Parliament and government are Hindu-dominated, majority in Mauritius are the Hindus. Yet all other communities have always had the opportunity to serve as parliamentarian or cabinet minister, deputy prime minister, and even prime minister and president of the republic. The state is therefore not identified with any particular community, but instead with all the communities. Similarly, in the field of employment, recruitment and promotion in the public and private sectors, emphasis is laid on meritocracy while avoiding as much as possible cronyism and discriminatory treatment. As much as possible, I said. The Public Service Commission is a fundamental institution, functioning in an autonomous manner and generally without political interference. An Equal Opportunity Act has recently been passed by Parliament to ensure that no discrimination in treatment is meted out to an individual on the basis of his creed, ethnic group, and cultural belonging. Every effort is made to provide equal chances and equal opportunities to every citizen to achieve social mobility while satisfying his economic, social, and physical needs, whether he belongs to the majority community or to one or the other of the minority communities, in order precisely to avoid the phenomenon of exclusion, and so that the concept of unity in diversity does not remain a mere slogan. In a draft report prepared in the context of the National Long-Term Perspective Study, Vision 2020 for Mauritius, the authors write, while the principle of diversity has been functioning at the level of ethnicity, the principle of unity has always been in operation at the level of the nation. The principle of diversity recognizes the existence of group specificity in terms of language, culture, religion, and the principle of unity recognizes the existence of the individual enjoying equal rights as a citizen living in a free, democratic, and secular state. The two principles have been complementary, not conflicting interaction, which explains the remarkable degree of peaceful coexistence within the plural framework which has characterized post-independence Mauritius. The country has thus achieved a high level of integration at national level in the sectors which govern public life: education, health, law, social security, economy, government. In the domains of private life, language, culture, religion, integration has operated largely at group level, with the state adopting a do-not-touch policy. Mauritius is often cited as an example of peaceful coexistence. Although the country has known continuous social and political stability, we know that we have to tread very cautiously. I do not want you to have the impression that we have reached an ideal stage in Mauritius and that Mauritius is utopia. It isn't. This peaceful coexistence has to be constantly nurtured, and there are always risks that some minor incident may be given an ethnic or religious twist with unpredictable consequences. We are not altogether different from societies where some people hold very strong allegiance to religion and get easily excited over religious issues, and where also exists vested interest to exploit religious feelings. In some of these societies, the most frequent and virulent form of hatred, disruption, and violence occur in the name of religion. In Mauritius, we are fully aware of the fact that cultural pluralism is not easy to manage, just as we are aware that if the state in a multi-religious society tries to show predilections in favor of the majority religion and takes measures which have the effect directly or indirectly of denying to the religious minorities a place of equality in the polity, the consequence will be instability, violence, and conflicts. The fourth heading is secularism, not godlessness. Experience and wisdom show secularism to be one of the most viable alternatives known and available for managing cultural pluralism. Only secularism can ensure real liberty of thought, expression and belief, and equality of status and opportunity to all citizens. Secularism is the only means of keeping a nation state like ours united and of harnessing the energy and creativity of all sections of society. The Republican Constitution of Mauritius is largely inspired from the Indian model. As in India, there is no state religion in Mauritius, but the constitutions of both countries have not ignored the importance of religion in the life of the individual. Hence, both constitutions guarantee the right to profess, practice, and propagate one's own religion. But religion is kept within strict boundaries. In public life and in all public matters, religion has no decisive influence. I believe it should be clearly stated that a secular state is not necessarily a godless state. Our constitution, for example, recognizes the existence of God. The president of Mauritius and other high dignitaries have, before assuming office, to take an oath when they have the choice of either swearing in the name of God according to their religion or making a solemn affirmation. Our brand of secularism may be viewed as a slightly special one. For while promoting republican values, we also ensure the blossoming of spiritual values as prescribed by the world religions. This is the reason for which the state provides an annual per capita grant, known as religious subsidy, to the major religions practiced in Mauritius, namely Buddhism, Christianism, Hinduism, and Islam. The state can be said to occupy a position which is equidistant to all religions. Norway, I understand, has recently introduced a similar system. I don't know by which name it calls it, a similar system which ensures that all the different religions are financially helped. Among the core symbols which all ethnic groups consider to be vital for the preservation of their culture, the more prominent ones are religion and language. These are indispensable for the continuation of their cultures as viable entities that can be transmitted to the next generations. Since the defense of their mother tongue is seen by many cultural minorities as their topmost priority, and the struggle for language maintenance is perceived as an effort by a group of people to preserve their ethnic identity within a plural society, every society is bound to pay heed or to give priority attention to this issue. In the field of education, I'm talking of Mauritius again, free from pre-primary to tertiary, all students learn the same core subjects, are entitled to the same basic facilities, and consequently develop like aspirations. The teaching of ancestral languages, by ancestral languages I mean languages like Hindi, Mandarin, Tamil, Telugu, Urdu, and others, which was first started by private organizations and thanks to individual initiatives, was later introduced in public schools at primary, secondary, and university level to respond to the necessity to forge a national conscience within the framework of unity in diversity. Creole, or Mauritian Creole, which is the language widely spoken and understood by all, is not yet taught. One simply acquires it. There is also an Indian dialect known as Bhojpuri, which is more widespread in the rural areas among Mauritians of Indian origin. But the fact of communicating in one language rather than another, communicating in French, in Bhojpuri, in Creole, or in English, does not in any way dilute or diminish the profound sense of belonging to a common motherland. In the diversity of languages, our local vernacular, that is the Mauritian Creole, is a unifying factor. With regard to the national media, care is taken to ensure that airtime is available for programs, local or imported, in the languages currently used by the various ethnic groups. Although the majority of the programs are in English and French, airtime is also devoted to Oriental language programs, including Hollywood, and if you've heard of them, Bollywood films, which some of you at least must have heard of, and more to the Creole language to cater for the needs of all linguistic groups. Likewise, certain public holidays are proclaimed by government in consultation with the religious heads of the 4 main religions in the island. This is how festivals like Christmas, the birth of Jesus Christ, Diwali, the Hindu festival of light, Eid ul-Fitr, the Muslim festival marking the end of the fasting Ramadan month, and the Chinese Spring Festival have come to be celebrated as national festivals and proclaimed public holidays. To illustrate the degree of tolerance exercised in Mauritius, I shall quote but one example. You will no doubt understand why I take this particular one. The majority of the population, as I have told you earlier, are of Hindu faith. Then comes the Christians, which constitute some 30% of the population, while the Muslims represent between 16 and 17% of the population. Yet, the 5-time-a-day call to prayer from all the mosques, and there are at least some 200 of them all over the place, are given through loudspeakers. And except for isolated instances, nobody seems to resent it, nor is any objection raised to the fact that civil servants of the Muslim faith are granted, subject to the exigencies of the service, time off on Fridays for the midday prayers in congregation in the mosques. Moreover, the wearing of the hijab, you must have heard of the hijab, the headdress by Muslim girl students or women civil servants, or the wearing of saris by Hindu working women, goes almost unnoticed and is far from being considered, as the French would say, une affaire d'État, a matter for the state to deal with, as the case seems to be in some of the more advanced countries. It is this sort of flexible attitude that helps to bring about cohesion within a multi-ethnic or multicultural society. In Mauritius, we try to avoid making mountains out of molehills and refuse to make a big issue when it comes to the religious beliefs and practices of our neighbor. We are very much aware of the delicate nature of our social fabric and of the need to maintain equilibrium among the various cultures and faiths. After all, this is what cultural pluralism is all about. Finally, interfaith dialogue. And I would have done, I promise. In multicultural societies, people of different religious denominations come to meet each other every day on the streets, in offices and in factories. They generally entertain good neighborly relations. Yet, one still quite often wonders whether these people really know each other, or whether they are able to share what is best in their respective cultural heritages. They are all certainly profoundly attached to their own religious traditions, but are not necessarily making sufficient effort, or do not take or make time to know and hence appreciate those of the others. I am of the firm belief that there is need to institutionalize permanent interfaith dialogue. To start a meaningful dialogue with someone of a religious faith other than yours requires an essential prerequisite, and that is the respect. The respect you should owe to that person as an individual and for the religion he or she practices. The respect can only manifest itself through a better mutual understanding, not a mere expression of politeness, but understanding based on the conviction that all men and women have a common origin and they have been created by God and that they constitute one large family, the family of God's creatures. And if you don't believe in God, of the human family. For cultural pluralism to flourish, more than tolerance for the other people's culture and religion is required. We should rejoice at cultural differences as a source of personal enrichment and attempt to learn from them, not to regard them as alien, unacceptable, or hateful. Governments cannot prescribe attitudes and behavior, such as respect and mutual understanding, but governments can prohibit attacks on people from different cultures and their practices, and they can set the legal stage for mutual tolerance and accommodation. They can outlaw some of the outward manifestations of xenophobia and racism and put a high premium on the preservation of cultural diversity. Intolerant cultures, where they exist, become particularly pernicious when they influence government's policy. Discrimination, segregation, and exclusion based on cultural traits then become official policy. In these cases, strong international pressures should be used to denounce and punish such policies, including all forms of racism, persecution of people because of their beliefs, and the curtailment of freedom of their own people. I shall now conclude, as I have promised, by saying that contrary to what could have been expected, the world is becoming increasingly diverse and its peoples increasingly intertwined as a result of globalization and population movements. Cultural pluralism is a reality that every government and every society have to face. It is a process and not an end in itself, and needs to be continuously nurtured. Democratic participation, respect for diversity, respect for the dignity of the individual, the provision of equal opportunity, and protection from discriminations are the necessary basic ingredients to ensure inclusiveness, social cohesion, security, and peaceful and harmonious society. I have done. Thank you very much.
So we now have some time for some questions. I think we have a microphone will circulate through the audience, and the President is happy to take your questions. Please. Okay. Okay, there's the first question. Could someone circulate the microphone?
Mr. President, thank you very much for joining us. It's an honor. My name is Joanna Curtis. I'm from New York, and I wanted to ask, how would you characterize, or how would you see the role of Mauritius in its relations with its neighbors on the African continent and within the AU?
Within the AU, you said, or EU? Well, Mauritius is very active at the level of the different African regional institutions that exist. Actually, Mauritius was among the founder member states, island states, of the Commission of the Indian Ocean. That is groupings of the five islands in the region of the Indian Ocean where Mauritius is situated. That is Madagascar, Réunion Island, which is a French department, Seychelles, Comoro Islands, and Mauritius. We, in the year 1982, if I'm not mistaken, we created this commission in order to encourage regional cooperation. Regional cooperation meaning not only cooperation in terms of economic and business and trade relations, but also cultural and political relations. We never present ourselves as a model, far from it. We are not a model. But we believe that having had the chance of being multicultural and multi-religious and multi-ethnic society, we can serve as a reference. We can tell our friends and our peers what mistakes they should avoid, which we also have done in the process. And therefore they can accede to a better result than we have done. If we have taken 50 years to reach certain of our targets, they can reach that target within a couple of years only. At the level of the AU, we are a very active member. At one time, before the AU became AU, it was OAU. The Prime Minister of Mauritius was at one time the president at the head of this very important institution. We lay a lot of emphasis on our belonging, and I insisted at the beginning of my intervention that we are very much part of Africa. And if we have been able to develop rather successfully, I must say, it is as a result of our being associated with Africa and not with Asia, which we could have done. But we opted, our former leaders, political leaders, had the vision to, because we have to be associated and to be part of the African continent, because then we belong to the greater groupings of the ACP countries, the African, Caribbean, and Pacific countries. The ACP, which enjoyed for a very long time, until recently, actually, from special treatment to the products coming from Mauritius. We were having a special price for our sugar. Our textiles used to have access to the European markets duty-free and quota-free as a result of this association with Africa. We belonged to the ACP countries, and we had a long-term arrangement with EU. But now this is being questioned. This has even been questioned and has been put. Well, it has been completely changed. Actually, we don't have any. We no longer have any preferential treatment for our sugar. This is why the price of sugar that we are being offered has gone down by nearly 36%, and our sugar industry is in the process of a slow death unless we do something about it. And I think government is trying to do its best. We are no longer talking of sugarcane industry. We are talking now of cane industry. Not sugarcane only, but cane industry. Because we are hoping to be able to make better use of the byproducts and produce ethanol and produce most probably energy out of bagasse, which is the product of sugarcane. So without being able to reply to your question, we are very active in the different regional groupings. Finally, there is the SADC countries and COMESA. There are many regional organizations. SADC is a grouping of the southern and eastern African countries. And we are cooperating, we are in cooperation with all those countries. I hope this answers your question. Yes?
Thank you, Excellency. My name is Pramono from Indonesia. I would like to have raise a question with regard to culture and your foreign policy. In particular, your initiative in the past to set up Indian Ocean Commission. And India is complaining because the name of Indian Ocean Commission, but India is not on it. And but I think it's also a matter of cultural relation because India is the largest Hindu community, and Mauritius also have the majority is also Hindu. That's the first question. The second question is how you see the contest of soft power between India and China in the region of Asia and the Pacific, because now China is quite active in Indian Ocean and India is quite active in South China Sea, and both are projecting the soft power. How it will impact in the long term? Thank you.
That's a very tall order. Well, the first question, you're dealing with the Indian Ocean Rim Association, which I didn't mention. I mentioned the Indian Ocean Commission, which groups 5 island states in the region. The Indian Ocean Rim Association concerns a number of countries which border the Indian Ocean, and that includes countries like India, Sri Lanka, Oman, and others. All those countries bordering the Indian Ocean. India has a major role to play, and not only India, because I think Australia too is part of the. So you've got the 3 big countries, like 3 big countries: India, Australia, and South Africa, who are probably the poles of attraction of this organization. And the ultimate objective is for greater integration of the economy and of the different countries, but it is a long process. I haven't heard the objection that you've mentioned about India or the role that India is playing. I think India is as active a member in that organization as other members. If you mean by your question that India is suggesting that this country, instead of the other country, should form part of the Indian Ocean Rim, yes. In the same way as other countries also are suggesting that this country, instead of the other one, should be the next group of members to join, because it is a body which is expanding progressively. It started with 7 countries, and then each country was allowed to bring in 1 member. It became 14, and it's gradually increasing. I'm afraid I can't tell you about India and China, because India is a major partner, economic and social partner of Mauritius. We have historical relations, we have blood relations with India, and India is present in Mauritius, has always been present, and has been present in all the development stages of our country. And now China is coming, great way, without imposing any conditions. Not that they need to pose any conditions in Mauritius, because, as I mentioned, Mauritius has been a democracy even before we became independent. We were a democracy before we became independent. We were a type of democracy, not the democracy that we have today, of course. Democracy itself is a process, and each country has its own a form of democracy. This is why I am of those who believe that democracy cannot be imposed from outside. Democracy has to emerge from inside, and each one has got his own model of democracy. And China is going to invest, is proposing to invest a lot in Mauritius, and to use Mauritius as a springboard for mainland Africa. We are friends to everybody. We are enemies to none. Although a superpower wants us to be the enemy of a country. Do you think I can approach this question? Have you heard of Diego Garcia? Do you know that it is Mauritian territory? You don't? Well, Diego Garcia is a small island, a paradise, they say, which, when we became independent in 1968, was retained by Britain. And that was contrary to UN resolutions, that at the time of independence of a country, you do not excise any part of that country. You give independence to the whole country. But what Britain did, Britain gave independence to the whole territory, Mauritian territory, except what is known as the Chagos Archipelago. And that archipelago has a series of islands, including Diego Garcia. They said that they wanted this place to act as a communication center, and that this country was not inhabited by anybody. It was a desert island, false, untrue, biggest lie ever said. All the people were taken away from that land and sent to some to the Seychelles and some to Mauritius. And then it was presented to the world that this is a desert island, and now we can lease it to the Americans. And the Americans have, on Diego Garcia, one of the biggest base outside America. And from that country, from that base, B-52 bombers leave to attack Iraq, Afghanistan. I'm not saying whether they are right in doing it or not. What I'm saying is that we are enemies of none, and our territory is being used to bombard countries, which, for all intents and purposes, are friends to Mauritius, because we have no enemies. So, as I was saying that I was promoting tourism by coming here, perhaps I'm also seizing this opportunity to, in the context of soft diplomacy, with Obama at the helm of the new America, perhaps something can be done, and something may come out of it. I was earlier talking to Mark, and I was telling him that there's much hope that is being pinned in President Obama, perhaps more than he could ever deliver. But for us, Mauritians, I think if we could solve the problems of Diego Garcia and giving us back our sovereignty on this, and then we'll decide what to do. It is not for others to decide to what use our land must be put to, you see? So we can use soft power by negotiating by telling them that the inhabitants of those islands, including Diego Garcia, were all from Africa. They all were taken there as slaves. And you know, when they were asked to leave, normally a ship used to come and provide them with provision from Mauritius or from the Seychelles. They were told that there was no food on the ship for them and that they had to leave. They had their pets, their dogs. Their dogs were put in incinerators and burnt in front of them. And they had to leave, knowing where to go. When they came to Mauritius, no provision was made to receive them as they should. Some of them stayed on the docks. Some committed suicide. Some lost their children and couldn't even pay for their funerals. Some became drug addicts, and today many of them are living in squalid conditions in the suburbs of the main city of Mauritius. You see, this was not on the agenda, but since you provoked me in a good way, I've told you about Diego Garcia and how now with President Obama we can use soft diplomacy in the name of la fraternité, fraternity. He can do something to alleviate the sufferings of those people, and by the same token give us, or incite British government to give us our sovereignty back on Diego Garcia and the other islands. If you don't mind, I think we have taken more time than, I don't know, it's up to you. No, it's up to you. I wouldn't like my colleague to sit and to wait.
My name is Donna. I'm from Canada. My question is about your recommendation about institutionalizing permanent interfaith dialogue. I'm intrigued by that and wonder what you recommend.
You see, there are several ways of going about doing it. The main idea is not to have the various religious bodies to act as firefighters. That is, whenever something happens, and then you will see all the different religious leaders coming together or being requested to come together to see how to go about solving the problems between community X and community Y, or religious X and religion X and religion Y. By institutionalizing, I mean that we should have a permanent body. We should encourage the setting up, the founding of a religious body where all the different heads or representatives of the various religions would meet on a regular basis and discuss about current problems in the country faced by the citizens of the country or in the region or in the world. Discuss about these problems. Discuss, for example, what are the common features that we have among the different religions? What are the differences? How to deal with those differences? How to encourage people to come in and share the richness of their culture and their religion. It shouldn't be, as I said, an ad hoc an ad hoc meeting of religious heads. I speak out of experience because in my country, there has been cases where mini riots had started as a result of a conflict between two groups of people. And in multicultural and multi-religious societies, unfortunately, anything that happens between two groups of people, sooner or later, gives the impression that it is a conflict between two communities or two people belonging to religious groups. Then, as an emergency, the religious heads are called, and they sit down and they discuss and they shake hands. They said, no, we respect you, you respect us. We have many points in common. You have many points in common. You see. So what I suggest, and what has been done in Mauritius, is the setting up of a Council of Religions. It is not a doing of the government, but it is out of private initiatives, and it is being assisted, I know, by organizations like the UNDP now. We said the last question. Let's see, last.
Thank you very much. President Uteem, thank you very much for your comments. While you were speaking, I passed this note to a friend, and my note says, Donna, isn't the Isle of Diego Garcia part of the grouping that he mentioned? But he only mentioned 5 of the 6. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, President. I just wanted to share an experience with you where throughout the world, my specialty is large-scale infrastructure development. And throughout the world, there are many, speak of soft diplomacy, there are many groups that have had their lands and resources inappropriately used or taken by others. And now there are mechanisms to deal with that. The Aboriginals of Northern Canada came to us because they had a $60,000 settlement that was being offered to them for a road. After we took on the case, I realized why they came to me, and that was what wasn't in the settlement is that they owned the diamonds on the land, and that's a lot more than $60,000. One of the reasons I'm here is this is, for me, part of a celebration because after 5 years, 1 week ago, they signed a multi-million-dollar agreement for their lands. Now, they can't get their lands back, but they can benefit from that. The structures are current impact benefit agreements. They're being used in Canada, Australia, and many parts of the world. And I'd be happy after this discussion to share that structure with you. And I certainly hope that, and I do think, that the American people who have now publicly discussed Diego Garcia and acknowledge that will actually resolve that issue for the displaced people of that population. I wish you well. I offer you my assistance in any regard in that matter, and that is, in fact, soft diplomacy.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. I knew that I wasn't wasting my time coming here, otherwise I wouldn't have come. But now I have a special reason to be satisfied that I did come. Of course, I'll take back this message of hope to our people, because they are also Mauritians. And British are now, as they are used to doing, my goodness, they are prepared to give them the British nationality now. My compatriots, they are prepared to give them, okay, you become British, we'll give you a passport, you can send your daughters and sons to Britain, but don't ask for Mauritius. Don't ask for that country to be back under the sovereignty of Mauritius. So what do you expect those people to say? Those people who have been made to suffer for years and years, living in squalid conditions, and now the son and the daughter seeing an opportunity of the El Dorado to go to Britain. Whether they'd be living in equally squalid conditions in Britain is immaterial, but they have to. So I would be very happy because the leader of the group, of the Chagosian group, who is a very close friend of mine, has been fighting and gained and lost in the London High Court, is now taking the case to the Human Rights Commission. and also fighting a case in the United States. Recently, a young PhD student has written a book on the Chagos archipelago in Diego Garcia, and the book was launched in Mauritius 2 weeks ago. And as you say, this question is now being taken up and being better known by the American people. I will certainly be delighted to have your coordonnées, as we say, and we'll keep in touch and we'll see how best our people can be helped. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for your patience.